I had rather be shut up in a very modest cottage with my books, my family, and a few old friends, dining on simple bacon and letting the world roll on as it liked, than to occupy the most splendid post which any human power can give. A little quote from the third President of the United States of America. His belief in the presidency as a position of the utmost honor, but also from which unchained pressure and cruel realities of not just the nation, but the skeleton of government, become unveiled. Once upon a Weehawken township in the year 1804, Jefferson's Vice President Aaron Burr fatally shot Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton in a duel over the latter's alleged libel. Sadly, Hamilton succumbed to his wound, and sadly, the common American millennial would likely just know this piece of history from a certain Broadway musical, rather than junior year high school United States history. Likewise, Jefferson Smith of Frank Capra's 1939 classic, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, responds to glaringly atrocious libel against him in the papers by traversing across Capitol Hill to punch as many journalists responsible. Compared to an actual 19th century duel, which was normal for its time, is seeing one man irreverently and guiltlessly punching his enemies too ludicrous for some viewers to accept even now? Or does it represent what us modern rugged Americans more than ever would like to do to biased reporters and public figures working on our dime? With a few contemporary political films produced after the 20th century, is there one that can tie itself to that of Frank Capra's reflection on basic goodness and humility? Whether they be tied to the American presidency, the press, or exhausting social justice ideas, such screen tales now completely lie under the blankets of boredom and annoyance, and wholly lack the virtues of hope and faith. Spike Lee's Da 5 Bloods almost and somewhat delves into the differing views of just one opposing individual, but then embarrassingly through the duration of its runtime tries to have its cake and eat it too, with snide remarks at a particular public figure, which really have nothing to do with the narrative, and a reveal at the end that further seals the filmmaker's true colors. Alex Garland's Civil War almost adheres to its idea of national turmoil due to the media's faults and lies, but it appears to have garnered the right crowd's commendations for its statement on the national divide. And now 2024's The Apprentice. Yeah, well, we all know what that's about.
Yes.
Hello, this is Donald Trump from Mr. Cohn. Thank you so much.
Donald who?
Through all that muck, eventually, those movies among viewers spark a cognizance that none of today's politically centered films touch upon certain virtues, particularly hope and faith. And via those two components arrive a desire for the rugged individual, a beacon of common sense values. In its depiction of a presidential cabinet's deceitful figures, Ivan Reitman's 1993 comedy Dave delivers with its presentation of an innocent man brought in to replace the real president.
Is this legal?
What's the result? A hopeful American landscape. In 1939, John Ford's Young Mr. Lincoln dramatizes Honest Abe as he spellbindingly wades through the early days as a lawyer with an oath under God prior to winning the presidency. Likewise, the outcome? A faithful American environment, embedded in the Founding Fathers' dreams. And in that same year of Young Mr. Lincoln's release, Capra released his esteemed Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, an encapsulation of hope and faith running through the bloodstream of one rough-hewn man, Jefferson Smith, played by the bright-eyed James Stewart.
In Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Capra takes his naive hero into America's corridors of power and shows how innocence and belief have a power all their own.
In light of the film's plot, some naysayers ask what do Lincolnian or Jeffersonian principles have to do with a dam-building graft scheme in a genuine summer camp that's born out of care for a nation's youth? It's true there are those that view this film as too naive, bloviating maybe, or just outright embarrassing. The schmaltz factor and visionary gene of Capra's caliber might be too much an acquired taste for some, and as a result, so too is unmitigated hope and faith. James Stewart's young and green Mr. Smith is but a regular townsman, leader of the Boy Rangers, and unashamed patriot, bearing an encyclopedic knowledge of American history. Through painstaking consideration, he's appointed to the Senate to replace Sam Foley, his state's deceased senator. But little does he know the truth. That dark underbelly of the political elite. How relatable that is to today's state of affairs. Is it worth it for a regular man, not entrenched in the inner workings of high governmental offices and demagoguing claptrap, to even run for president? In seeking to fulfill his dreams and do right by the nation's constitution he's sworn to help protect, Smith only comes to face a destructive machine built from lies, propaganda, libel, and slander of the Washingtonian gentry. The Mensch looks back at all the ideals of American exceptionalism as espoused by the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson's own hand, and as adopted by the wisdom of honest Abraham Lincoln. Must this sort of demoralization faced by Smith, and frankly, this travesty that we as Americans face today, only lead us into further despair about the state of the shining city on a hill? Or should we, just like Smith, choose to upend this demoralization into motivation, so as to make that city on a hill gleam even brighter, not just for other nations, but for ourselves and our future children? It's a grand mission, but that appears to be what the artist in Frank Capra is trying to achieve.
I know my father used to get letters from people who said that they often were convinced by this film to enter the political arena, for better or for worse, because they saw that the opportunity for really making a difference, for an individual making a difference, was dramatized so clearly in this film.
It's a funny thing about these films with its timeless innocence and zeal, shooting right through the lens and simply witnessed from the close-up of the performer's eyes. Through cinematographer Joseph Walker's lighting, Capra achieves this wondrous and universal language of desperation, goodwill, and stalwartness that can never be truly explained or felt perfectly in the verbal sense.
We aspired to be Mr. Smith. We aspired to all of those moments in the film that spoke to that intense, innocent, and moral integrity. Capra found America in himself and brought it out as needed.
Liberty is too precious a thing to be buried in books, Miss Saunders. Men should hold it up in front of them every single day of their lives and say, I'm free to think and to speak. My ancestors couldn't, I can.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington proves itself to be not only a cautionary tale for the state of affairs today, but merely a timeless classic about the rugged individual, one who bears our worries and dreams, and enacts upon them in front of a large political apparatus that's disillusioned much of society, and to the fullest degree is so clear, especially now. After taking and accepting all the cannons and bullets shot at him by the lying media and the establishment public figures he once looked up to, like his father's former friend Senator Payne, Jeff Smith overcomes it all and successfully upends the entire Senate into the kind of system this nation's founders had hoped for.
One little line I want to read out of a correspondent who saw the picture in France those last days before the Germans banned American films, wrote, "Cheers and acclamation punctuated the famous speech of the young senator on man's right and dignity. It was," wrote the correspondent, "as though the joys, suffering, love, hatred, hopes and wishes of an entire people who value freedom above everything found expression for the last time."
Under the weight of his own cross, Smith displays the sheer, impossible idealism through unmitigated hope and faith. It's quite a sweet feeling that we as movie lovers can return to something like this. No matter what anyone thinks of this screen gem from 1939, no matter what we think about the presidency being a worthy goal for ambitious individuals to strive towards, and no matter who takes the highest office of the land this year, we as Americans should continue to do, as Thomas Jefferson put it so eloquently, to be shut up in a very modest cottage with our books, our families, and a few old friends, dining on simple bacon, and letting the world roll on as it liked, than to occupy the most splendid post which any human power can give. Like Jefferson Smith, with his zeal and compassion for the common man, we can only hope and pray that the future of the nation can be an improved tomorrow that supersedes and triumphs over a very depraved yesterday.